are naturally being made. It is great to see you this morning. And I don't know, the smile will not be wiped from my face the entire day, I am sure, because for me, anyways, this is a really momentous occasion, and you're witnessing that. We have 4 Community Benefits Coalition in front of you today, and it's the first time that we're actually meeting. So community benefits are really taking off as a good model for engaging on infrastructure projects and ensuring that communities have a voice in how their neighborhoods are shaped for the future. I want to introduce our 4 panelists. We have Carl Andrus, Kumsa Baker, Sarah, thank you very much, and Brian Gray. And all from different community benefits coalition. So Carl is from the Hamilton Community Benefits Coalition, Kumsa from the Toronto Community Benefits Coalition, Sarah from the Halton Community Benefits Coalition, and Brian from the Windsor Essex Community Benefits Coalition. And the way that we will present this session today is that I will ask each presenter to come up here and to give us a 5 to 7 minutes overview of their journey with their Community Benefits Coalition. After which, I will be asking a series of questions that I've shared with them to consider, and they will take turns answering. And then we'll open up the session for you to be able to speak directly to them. All right, so we will start with Kumsa Baker. And Kumsa is the campaigns manager for the Toronto Community Benefits Network. He joined us this year, actually, right at the very beginning stages, but really in the middle of our campaign for the Rexdale Rising Woodbine Casino Community Benefits Agreement that we were able to we won recently for the community. I want to invite Kumsa up to share his 5 minutes remark.
Awesome. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be here and to share such a great year in the community benefits space across the city of Toronto. And I want to take about 7 minutes to go through some key important wins that we've had over the last, I'd say, 7 months, but also guide you through how we got there. So I'm going to briefly talk about the history of the Toronto Community Benefits Network, but also the community benefits movement in the city from the start. I'll also go through a quick what are CBAs, so for folks that don't know much about CBAs or new to this, to what community benefits are, I'll go through that briefly, and then also go through some policy and practice through all 3 levels of government. I'm going to start off by showing a quick video. It's a quick 2-minute video about community benefits.
My name is Ahmed Abdi.
My name is Renee Roy.
My name is Jonathan Hapta.
I'm the first person to get hired through the Community Benefits program with Metrolinx.
Projects such as Eglinton Crosstown, which is the largest transportation infrastructure project in Canada, as a way of transforming local communities.
United Way for decades has brought people together, but we always lacked the glue to make it stick and find tangible ways to get people good jobs in specific neighborhoods. And then pops in Metrolinx.
Community benefits usually includes jobs and apprenticeships and professional administrative and technical jobs. It also usually includes contracts and social procurement for local, social, and diverse businesses.
This is project and policy innovation at its best. You're building a $5.3 billion light rail transit in a way that's bringing community to the table, inviting them in from the beginning.
It's good for young people and then for newcomer people.
We have seen firsthand that community benefits really changes lives.
You've given me a chance to get a stable home. My truck is just a vehicle now, and this is kind of my community now.
I was able to support my wife, my new family, and prepare for my kid. Apprenticeships like this are important because they give youth a different route, something productive, something that has the potential to make a lot of money and get a lot of transferable skills.
Not only a life changed, but an entire neighborhood transformed with jobs and dollars going back into that local economy.
The great lessons we've learned on Eglinton and the Community Benefits Program provides us with an excellent platform to roll these same benefits out on our other LRT programs, but also on our really big program, which is the GO expansion.
10 years from now, I want us to be able to look back and say, with the public infrastructure dollars we spent, we not only built a world-class piece of infrastructure, we are intentional about ensuring that those in the community who needed opportunity most actually shared in the benefits of that project.
It is the blueprint for us and for inclusive economic growth in this province and in this country.
Because in the end, our mission is to connect our communities, and we do that even better when there are more local benefits for those communities.
The reason I wanted to show this video is sort of wanted to take you through the journey of how we got to where we are sort of today, right? It's been a long, I'd say about 10 years now. I don't know if folks do remember in 2008 there was a huge casino debate in Rexdale. At the time it was called Woodbine Live. This U.S. company was contracted to build a new casino facility in Rexdale, and this is at a time where there was a high unemployment in the area, a large need for jobs and opportunities for local residents. So in Rexdale, community residents, also labor coalitions came together to push back against this developer and also the City of Toronto to say, if you're going to be putting a casino in the heart of our community, we need to ensure that there's good opportunities, jobs, unionized jobs for local residents, but also opportunities for businesses and also other amenities for the local neighborhood. This work was very important in terms of sort of starting the grassroots movement of community benefits in the City of Toronto. As you may know now, that project fell through in 2011. The U.S. company Gordie fell under financial hardship during the recession, and they were unable to go through with the project. However, I'll talk in a few moments. I'll talk a bit more about the Rexdale campaign. So in 2015, the Toronto Community Benefits Network began serving 6 targeted groups: youth, women, urban Aboriginals, racialized peoples, veterans, and newcomers. Our main goal is to advocate for community benefit agreements, and this includes good jobs, economic opportunities for the community through investment in infrastructure and urban development. Some of the programs that we focus on include apprenticeships, so mainly focusing on those 6 target groups, but also professional administrative technical jobs, because we know there's not only apprenticeship jobs, there's also other professional administrative jobs that are tied to the construction industry, whether it be in the design phase or whether it be in the operation phase as well. There's also other programs including social procurement, so opportunities for local businesses to also benefit from these infrastructure investments, and then also neighborhood and environmental improvements. So looking around like the local neighborhood, discussing with residents, building a common understanding amongst residents that if a certain infrastructure investment is coming to the neighborhood, there also needs to be a focus on looking around the surrounding neighborhood and around how that developer, that development can integrate well with the local community. I just want to go through a quick map sort of showing the sort of property increase in sort of the inner suburbs across the city of Toronto. So as you can see, in 1981, the inner suburbs, fairly middle class. And then just in 2006, we've seen a large increase of low-income families, especially in some of the pockets of the city of Toronto, some of the inner suburb pockets of the city of Toronto. And you could see Rexdale's pretty much right over here. So what are community benefits? So community benefits are legally binding agreements either between the community, the city of Toronto, and a project developer. Some of the commitments that are included in community benefits include local hiring, social hiring, procurement opportunities for local businesses, but also businesses from racially diverse communities. Oversight by community throughout the project life cycle, so ensuring that not only is the community involved in the negotiation of a community benefits agreement, but also seeing through the implementation of that agreement. And then there's also mechanisms for enforcement, so monitoring and also evaluation metrics to ensure that whatever commitments are made, they're followed through upon. So this slide is just a quick snapshot of some of the more recent projects. I know we heard in the video about the Eglinton Crosstown Lrt. So that was the first community benefits projects ever in the city of Toronto. The project was valued at $5 billion, and it's a 5-year project. And some of the community benefits that were included in that were hiring of apprenticeships, so 10% commitment that all apprenticeships would come from either local youth or youth from racially diverse backgrounds. And this is a common thing that we've seen amongst all of the 3 projects, is that there's been commitments of 10% apprenticeship opportunities. There's also, more recently, as Rosemary discussed, the Woodbine casino expansion. And this was a 19-year project. The provincial government contracted a consortium to operate the Woodbine casino. And just recently, in May, there was the first ever community benefits agreement that was signed between the City of Toronto and that consortium. And some of the community benefits that are included for this project include 20% local hiring. There's also a 20% social hiring. So in total, 40% of all jobs at this facility will either be local hiring or hiring of people from diverse backgrounds. There's also a commitment for 10% local and diverse procurement. So local businesses, also diverse businesses, will also have opportunities over the next 19 years to be able to bid on certain opportunities at this facility. And then there's also some of the neighborhood environmental improvements, right? In Rexdale, there's about a 24% childcare coverage rate. That's in conversations with the community, that was one of the biggest barriers for people actually accessing work. And one of the biggest, like, sort of, I guess, sticking points in the negotiation was to tell the developer to say, like, we know that you're committing these jobs, but if we're not removing some of the barriers for people actually getting into these jobs, then we're not really doing our job. So getting that $5 million investment to be able to build a childcare facility in and around the neighborhood, we're hoping that can also be able to facilitate for some of the workers at this facility is really important. And then there's also the good job piece, right? So not only have we gotten commitments around the local and social hiring and commitments for those, but also what type of jobs are they, right? So we got a 50% commitment that all the jobs would be full-time, because we know in entertainment industry, it's quite precarious work. And then more recently, one of the first community benefit pilots, so the Ontario government has announced there's going to be 5 projects across the province of Ontario that will include a community benefits pilot. So the framework that we've seen with the Eglinton Crosstown will also be applied to all 5 of these pilots. And one of them coming out of that is the Finch West LRT project, which is getting started fairly soon. That project is valued at $2.5 billion, and it's another 5-year project, and then also similar commitments for the local community, for community benefits for that project. I just wanted to go quickly through a quick snapshot as to some of the successes of the Eglinton Crosstown. If folks want to see some of the major highlights in terms of working with the local community, we've got $5 million spent on local businesses along Eglinton Avenue. We've also seen certain issues that or that community has brought up through this project, specifically Little Jamaica and some of the businesses there that have had to either close down their business temporarily or some even full-time, just because it's really hard to for people and for residents to be able to go around and actually go to these businesses. This is some of the hiring commitments to date. So as of September 5, the community benefits commitments at the Eglinton Crosstown has gotten 217 people or local and racialized people into these jobs. So it's great to see that that we have tracking mechanisms so that we're able to see exactly how successful this is and how we can continue to apply this to other opportunities and other projects. Just in terms of community benefits policies, so there's policies across multiple levels of government. So the City of Toronto has 2 policies, or they currently have 1 policy and currently are working on another. So they currently have the City of Toronto Social Procurement Policy, and also currently working on a City of Toronto Community Benefits Policy. So in the near future, the City of Toronto will have its own policy that will be able to identify certain projects over a certain threshold that will need to include certain community benefit commitments. The Government of Ontario has the Infrastructure for Jobs and Prosperity Act, which came out just after the Eglinton Crosstown framework, that requires certain bidders that either construct or maintain their assets to have community benefit commitments which is actually in their project agreement. And then just recently, the federal government has its own, what they call community employment benefit policy, and that only is specific to sort of local hiring, so looking at some of the large infrastructure projects that are federally funded, and then seeing how those contractors can look locally to see and target certain groups of that have been underrepresented in sort of the construction trades in those local communities to see how they can provide opportunities for those communities. And then just some of the future projects in the City of Toronto. So I talked a bit about those pilots. So the community benefit pilots at the provincial level, they have committed to community benefits for the McDonald Block reconstruction. McDonald Block is where staff at Queen's Park, staff of the Ontario government work, and they're going through a large redevelopment project there. There's also another redevelopment project at the West Park Health Center, which also has community benefit policies or community benefit commitment there through the pilot project. And then lastly, the Metrolinx Go Transit project. So Metrolinx has committed for all some of their Go Transit projects. They're going to be including community benefits for that. And then, yeah, just like sort of some of the key differences between some of these projects we've seen between like sort of the Metrolinx model versus the Woodbine model. So the Metrolinx model was a signed agreement between community partners and the project developer. The Woodbine Casino agreement was signed between the City of Toronto and the City of Toronto and the developer, and this is just because the City of Toronto has planning requirements that they included to ensure that if the developer was to get the rezoning, that there were certain requirements that they had to meet, and they've also registered that onto title, And yeah, just lastly, sort of the CBA negotiation process. So sort of how do we get from start of like working with the local community till the end of of actually getting a signed community benefits agreement. And it always doesn't have to start at the top and go around. Like for the sometimes, like for the Woodbine, we started with organizing with the community and then went straight to activating the local City of Toronto, because we knew the City of Toronto had the planning tools to be able to require the developer to meet these requirements, versus the Metrolinx, where we directly engaged with Metrolinx, or with that project. We engaged with Metrolinx there. And yeah, if you have any more questions, I know it's fairly brief, so I've been trying to go through a lot of information in a very brief amount of time. But I'm free after to go through some finer details if need be. Thank you.
So Sarah, since joining the Halton Poverty Roundtable in January 2018, Sarah has been steadily guiding the organization towards raising more awareness of poverty in our community. She authors a monthly article on poverty published by Inside Halton, the Oakville Beaver, and the Burlington Post. Her continued leadership in engaging key partners and community agencies to work together has contributed to stronger and more diverse partnerships with a focus on positive and collective impact. Sarah brings a strategic and structured partnership approach to the organization by understanding the needs of those living the experience of poverty in Halton. And I'm just so pleased to welcome her to describe her journey. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here today. And this is an amazing opportunity for all of us, because we haven't gotten together all too often, and our journeys are different. So you'll hear a little bit about what we do in Halton, which is actually very different from the others at the table here today. So I'll go through what the Halton Poverty Roundtable is, what the Halton Community Benefits Network is, an overview of our purpose and objectives, our organizational milestones to date, and the path forward for the next rest of this year and into the future. So my slides are a little bit out of order for some reason, but I'll continue to go through them. So the who we are and what we do. So the Halton Poverty Roundtable is comprised of regional change makers. We are literally a roundtable of community organizations who come together on a quarterly basis to talk about poverty, the complexity of poverty, and how we can eliminate poverty in our community. So we are an organization that works to shed light on all aspects of poverty in Halton and highlight the reality of poverty in our neighborhoods. As you may know, Halton is comprised of Oakville, Burlington, Milton, and Halton Hills. Those communities are generally referred to as affluent and prosperous. So there is that difficult barrier to overcome for our organization to actually make awareness of poverty an issue, make it relevant to people who don't see it. So we don't see the poverty that you see in Toronto or Hamilton. However, it is very much in our community. We have over 44,000 people living below the low-income measure in our community. It's just that it's not seen, so it's not recognized, and therefore no action is ever taken. So we are hoping to connect, educate, and act together with the aim of eliminating poverty in our community, but also raising awareness that it does exist. The Halton Community Benefits Network is an initiative under the Halton Poverty Roundtable. We have deep roots in our community due to the relationships that we have existing as the Halton Poverty Roundtable, and we have a diverse and extensive network of community partnerships. So we actually came, I'm going to go off script, we actually came together as an organization because we wanted to do this work. We had not had a project in Halton that has been announced, or at the time wasn't announced. We've been together for about 2 years, and we just knew this work was coming. There was something that was, the momentum was moving, and once something happens, you can't stop it, so we wanted to get ahead of that and really be sure that we were at the table, ready to organize when the time came for us in Halton. So the purpose of our group initially was to educate the public about the concept of community benefit agreements, to advocate for community benefit agreements to be included in large infrastructure projects in Halton region. So like I said, we didn't have an LRT or anything like that. We just wanted it. And we wanted to show that there was value in doing this kind of work. So we wanted to activate community partners to prepare for their low-income clients, for employment, for newly created jobs that would occur, and with the goal of generating a significant social impact. So the objective is to support the providers and anchor institutions in Halton region in the development and adoption of community benefits agreements, the work of intermediaries and beneficiaries to facilitate the activation of employment opportunities resulting from social procurement and community benefits agreements in Halton. So this is a little bit of our journey to date. So the Atkinson Foundation delivered a community presentation in 2015 about community benefits and decent work, and this is where the idea was really incubated in our community. We took this on as something that was something that we wanted to continue to see and pursue in our community. So in 2016, we applied for the Ontario Trillium Foundation grant, which we were successful at getting, and that really was our first opportunity to meet and explore CBAs in Halton region. What opportunities existed, what might be coming down the pipeline, really engaging with our local politicians and seeing what we can do collaboratively together and work for change. So in 2017, the brand was developed and our chair presented to Halton Region Executive Committee, so the regional level of government. We have a two-tier system of government in Halton Region, so and this falls underneath the jurisdiction of, well, everyone, but really Halton Region. So we presented to Halton Region about the concept. And in 2018, we hosted a week-long conference on community benefits agreements with expert Sandra Hamilton. She came from British Columbia. She is what she likes to call, she has a social MBA, so she focuses on the social bottom line on community benefits agreements and social procurement. So we hosted that conference in the spring, and we actually were awarded one of the 5 provincial pilot projects for the consolidated courthouse. So a courthouse, in Halton, the province is developing and going to be constructing a new 21-room courthouse facility, and that is now one of the 5 pilot projects that will be happening in the province. So this is different than the horizontal builds of an LRT. This is a vertical build, and in Halton, it's actually in the middle of nowhere. So it's really difficult, and I'll talk about the difficulties, why that's challenged in a little bit, but really because no one cares. Like, there's no community around it, no one's being impacted, there's not businesses being affected. So it's kind of like, courthouse, we need one, great. But why do we care about the dollars that are being invested in our community is what we want the community to really activate on and have our politicians and everyone else follow on board. So that's a little bit different of why we're different and why we all do different things. And so in the future, we're going to prepare to build the courthouse, and we're going to continue to advocate for that community benefits agreements and what that looks like and what we would like to see along with our community. And we're going to propose some other options for community benefits in Halton as well as things arise. There is some talk about a Metrolinx hub in Milton, and we'll see what else we can get as a pilot to prove that this is a valuable effort for the community. So what we're doing going forward, we're trying to scale up our efforts. So Halton is right beside Hamilton, right beside Peel, right beside Toronto. So how can we scale up our efforts to really have that collective impact in advocating and implementing CBAs? So lessons learned, coming together to foster policy and program development. We are less of an advocating community than maybe some of the others. We are a bedroom community of both Hamilton and Toronto. So the people who live in Halton don't necessarily become super involved in issues like this. So how can we foster that, and how can we learn from others to really have that community grassroots level developed? So pilot the concept, which we really would like to do. We have been having conversations with the Ministry of Infrastructure and the Attorney General on the courthouse. Those conversations were prior to the government going through the election period, and we are now trying to re-engage them to ensure that this project will continue as promised by the last government. So we are still in waiting and see mode on that, but we're continuing to follow up every once in a while. Stakeholder engagement. So we're going to continue to educate and convene meetings with anchor institutions, connector groups, organizations, and beneficiaries to prepare for practical implementation of community benefits agreements. These include Halton Region, the towns, the 4 municipalities, the Sheridan colleges in our area, the hospitals, and other broader public sector organizations, as well as organizations such as the Multicultural Council, Employment Services, the YMCA, Employment Services, Goodwill, all of those kind of little or smaller organizations that actually will be involved in the process. We're trying to get everyone up to speed on what would need to happen. And we're really looking for a hub or a parent to take on this work with us. And then community dialogue, so continue to bring this issue to the forefront. So key issues and opportunities. So Halton projects to demonstrate results and lessons learned. So really what we need is something to show value and show that this is a great thing for our residents And so without having something that we can actually pilot and prove, that is difficult to have results. Funding for convening, consulting, and implementation. So as we all know, funding is a difficult thing to get, and especially in this area, there are few who are willing to fund such endeavors. There are some great partners that we have had in the past, such as the Atkinson Foundation, the Ontario Trillium Foundation, and the Oakville Community Foundation, but there is a big need for this kind of work, and because it's provincial-wide and now federally being adopted, maybe this is something that can be included in the community benefits agreements right in the contract, and that's something that we're looking at doing, if that's possible, to actually make sure that the community is well represented and funded accordingly, so therefore are able to attend community sessions. And I know that there are issues with transportation, childcare, and others, to have people with lived experience come and contribute their voice to these conversations and these dialogues. So having those opportunities to be well funded and accessible to everyone will allow for all voices to be heard at the table. And finding the right partner for scale-up efforts. So that is a difficult task sometimes, especially in Halton. There are many players. There's just no forefront player that's coming to the table yet. Many other organizations across the province have had a United Way or similar type organization come in and really help out with the structure. It takes a lot of effort to get this moving. And so we are currently looking for the right partner to scale up our efforts as well. And then obviously execution, when the time comes, we'll be ready to go and be able to prove results. And so that's kind of where we're at in Halton. We're still kind of wait and see mode, but we're kind of ready to go, hit the ground running, and we're happy to learn from our partners here at the table today. So thanks, and I'm open to questions later on. There you go.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. I really love community benefits agreements. As you can see, it's a process at the end of the day that allows community people from the grassroots to be able to speak directly with decision makers, to be able to impact changes in their own lives, in their own futures, in their own neighborhoods. And it really takes leadership from the nonprofit organizations like you in here today to be able to drive these conversations forward. As Sarah has mentioned, the Atkinson Foundation, the United Way, Metcalf have been real amazing supports in helping to move many of the coalitions forward to be able to build that structure that is actually needed. It's a lot of hard work in doing all of this, and labor is so important to have at the table. For us, the experience in Toronto, the Toronto and York Region Labor Council, being there at the table as a support, lending expertise and time, of their labor partners was also tremendous. And so I want to bring up now Carl Andrus from the Hamilton Community Benefits Network to speak to their journey. And so before you come up, I'll also say a few good things about you. All right. So Carl, he currently serves with the Hamilton Community Benefits Network Executive Committee in the role of VP of Community. So there is a co-chair situation with labor and community being at the table together. He also is a community member of the board of directors. He brings into the organization a lifetime of grassroots community activism. He's politically active at protests and community benefits from a very young age. He also is the proud son of the late Carl Andrus, a well-respected Hamilton community leader. He currently serves as the co-chair of the Stinson Community Association, one of Hamilton's 11 Code Red neighborhoods. He has lived and real experience in poverty and understands firsthand the challenges of mental health and employment. Carl works on poverty and politics, as well as publish in the Raise the Hammer, The Spectator, and he has appeared in a pro-transit activist role on local radio AM 900. I can't wait to hear your voice. Okay, and when not volunteering to change the world, he is engaged in a leadership role for a team of IT specialists. Amazing. Please come on up, Carl.
Well, I think that sounds better than I actually am, but anyway. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen to me today. I'm going to talk about the Hamilton Community Benefits Network and our journey so far. And as I begin to talk about our building the coalition and some of our partners and members, we have to acknowledge the debt of gratitude we owe to the Toronto Community Benefits Network. They really gave us a massive running start in terms of their experience in helping us out early on in our organizing, our engagement. We even stole some of their bylaws and and used them. So they were very much instrumental in helping us out, and I really need to acknowledge that first and forthright. So I'm going to talk about how we started. About 20 months ago, it became evident that the Hamilton Lrt Project was finally, after 8 years at that point, was going to be moving forward, and there was a need for an organization to help negotiate with Metrolinx a community benefits agreement. We naturally looked to Toronto, as I said, as a model to assist us, and with a $10,000 startup grant from the Atkinson Foundation, we hit the ground running and started to organize and galvanize political support. Now, we had a little bit of an advantage in Hamilton in that we had strong support from the Hamilton District Labour Council and the Building Trades Council, as well as an experiment that had been going on in what was called the Neighbourhood Action Strategy in Hamilton, which took the 11 poorest neighbourhoods in the city and tried to, with support of both City Council and the Hamilton Community Foundations, organize them into entities that did their own grassroots community engagement. So we had the small governance. Hamilton also has a rich history of local neighborhood governance, although that doesn't necessarily always include the most marginalized of our society. So we had the pieces were already starting to be there to form this. Now, that doesn't mean it was still easy, but at least we had a head start over like our friends in Halton, and then there were already these organizations that were already thinking about community and actively engaged. And as I said, we had heavy support from labor in Hamilton due to the heavy labor background in our city. So what we did from there is we started hosting meetings after meetings after meetings. I think it was every 2 weeks for almost 10 months. We sent out invites to every group that we could think of and some that we didn't, and then depended on some of our partners to reach out to their networks to bring together as many organizations as we could, to the point where the Hamilton Community Benefits Network now represents about 100,000 people in the city of Hamilton, which comes in handy later on, and I'll talk about that in a bit. So we were able to bring together divergent groups that sometimes wouldn't talk to each other. So Acorn Hamilton and the Tenant Solidarity Network, the Chamber of Commerce is also sitting with us and a vested interest in BIAs and business supports. So we built a broad coalition, but wanting to keep in mind that we wanted to keep things at the grassroots. We wanted to make sure that the lowest members of our organization at the community level had their voice amplified at the table at Metrolinx. And that was something that was very keen on us from the outset. So we built this broad coalition. We set out to incorporate, and we had our first AGM exactly 1 year ago, and then we hit the ground running. Again, strictly as volunteers. As mentioned, funding is always an issue when you're a not-for-profit. So for the most part, other than in-kind donations from the Hamilton Brantford Building Trades, who was generous enough to donate Mark, our president, to us for about 20 hours a week. We have been all volunteer driven. So what we did after building this coalition and engaging as many of the voices as we could in the city of Hamilton, we started talking with Metrolinx about the Hamilton Lrt Project. Now, the Hamilton Lrt Project is unique. It's a $1.3 billion project that required the expropriation or purchase of 91 properties, including residential properties, in the densest part of the city. So there was no right of way. This is carving a path right through the middle of the city. If you can imagine, take King Street in Toronto and then run an LRT line down the middle of it. So it was a massive challenge. It's also one of our most socioeconomically repressed areas in the city of Hamilton. It contains a great deal of poverty, especially child poverty rates. So this was a very, very a difficult project to negotiate with Metrolinx in some of the community challenges. There's also a lot of political uncertainty. If you take a look at the chart of the perceptions of the build, you can see the Eglinton, Huron, Ontario, Hamilton, and Finch West. And you'll notice awareness of the project is very high in Hamilton. Support for the project, not so much. Coming in at 59% along the line, and citywide only about 42% in some polls. So there hasn't been a lot of communication to to Hamilton because it's a very divided city. Although we were very blessed to have a broad coalition that we formed, our city is very divided along east, west, and mountain and suburb and inner city regions. So that presented a great deal of challenges in moving the project forward. So right now we are at the RFP where it says summer 2018. That actually got delayed to fall. So the RFP has been released. 3 companies are bidding to become the project co that will ultimately get the contract to build this line. We have had several meetings with Metrolinx laying out introductories meetings. Unfortunately, things have been on hold between the provincial election and our pending municipal election, so there hasn't been a lot of forward movement. Metrolinx has kind of been in a caretaking holding mode around the project and waiting to see what's happening with the new government. But I want to talk about some of the things that we are hoping to get out of a community benefits, building on Toronto's success. So we are aiming a little bit higher and looking at between 15 and 20% total employment as a pipeline to employment of our most marginalized. Now our demographics are a little bit different in the city of Hamilton than the city of Toronto in terms of the groups, but we will be very similar types of groups that we'll be targeting. And we're looking at both the union trades and the professional, administrative, and technical jobs as part of that 20%. So whether that's 10 and 10 or 7 and 13, it will very much depend on negotiations with Project Co, but that's what we're looking at out of the gate. We are also, because of those 91 properties that have been procured for construction, Metrolinx is not used to being a property owner. They are now sitting on a bunch of property that is sitting on a transit corridor, which has an immense uplift potential. That is to say that once the LRT line is built, those lands are going to be worth far more than Metrolinx paid for them initially. So one of our key issues, and one of the key issues in Hamilton, is social and affordable housing. So we're looking at how and what ways we can use our community partners and our political power to get Metrolinx to do something with that land other than just reselling it to developers, and whether that's mixed-use commercial, donations to Hamilton City Housing. We're not sure how that looks like, but Metrolinx has already indicated very early on that they are interested in working on ways with this property. We're also keenly aware of the need for community or hub space. So like I said, we have a very organized set of community groups in Hamilton that represent a lot of the neighborhoods, but they have nowhere to meet, especially nowhere spaces that are accessible. So community hub spaces we're definitely interested in, and we're interested in seeing what we can leverage in the operation and maintenance facility itself. It's a giant building that they're constructing there. It's about $130 million, I believe, for the O&M facility, and there's going to be a lot of extra space. We'd like to see what can be done with that. Local stakeholders and neighborhood residents are really keen on talking specifically about art projects. Because of those 91 properties that have been procured, there's also been a series of landlords and owners across the LRT line that have started boarding up their buildings in anticipation of property uplift and resale of those properties. So right now there are stretches along the LRT line that are quite boarded up. It's actually quite a bit of an eyesore. So we've been working on them to figure out what can be done with these vacant buildings in terms of animating them with community space. And then once the buildings are torn down before the construction takes place, what are the potentials for those vacant lots in terms of community access, pop-up parks? We're looking at engagement with them because large sections of the major intersection in Hamilton will be blocked off for up to 6 month periods. What can we do for festivals, street parties, all kinds of concerts on those blocked off streets during construction. We've been working with the BIA and the chambers on figuring out how to support business. It's one of the things that we learned from Toronto is that the businesses are deeply affected by the construction and by wayfinding, and what ways can we get Project Co to make sure that their employees are eating at the local restaurants on the line and shopping on the local restaurant? What incentives can we do to bring people into these areas while they're boarded up and difficult to access? We've been working with the Hamilton Wentworth District School Board and the Hamilton Art Gallery on some, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about in a bit, on engaging arts and public arts construction in the education, working with school boards. Project Co, we're hoping to ask them to implement food drives and staff volunteers for community projects, which we've seen from the Toronto Community Benefits Networks. Hamilton also has, and I'll just go back a bit, along this entire LRT corridor, there's almost a parallel series of alleys that are left over from the 20s when the the city was being built in a grid pattern that basically parallel most of that line, and we want to talk about what can be done with those alleyways and laneways in terms of animating them back into public spaces, turning them into cycle lanes, turning them into pop-up parks, rear entrances for businesses during construction. So that's one of the other key things that we're looking at that separates Hamilton from some of the other projects. Of course, Hamilton has a terrible, terrible legacy during any building project of community engagement. They barely pay. Public engagement theater is actually what it's been called by some activists in our city. And so what we want to do is make sure that we are magnifying the voices, not just of our network, but of the communities and of the people affected by this construction, to make sure that they have a voice and that the things that they're saying are being repeated right at the table with Metrolink staff, with City of Hamilton staff. And that goes on to say also to make sure that we've got resident and local stakeholder input on station design. Local people know how they use things the most, and we want to make sure that it's not just Project Co that just drops a generic station, that the same one that they're rolling out in every other community, and then a bunch of our community partners are like, well, actually that's the way that station faces isn't as accessible as it could be for people coming from this building here, or if the ramp were just slightly over somewhere else, it would be much more accessible. And those are the kind of small things and small wins that we think will cost nothing to Project Co. It could be something as simple as lighting. I'll give you an example. In the city of Hamilton, we had a new stadium that was built for the Pan Am Games, and for 6 months, the stadium lighting would not turn off. For whatever reason, during the installation of this stadium, no one had thought to put any off switches on the lights. As something as simple. So we had the entire community around 3 o'clock in the morning, blinding stadium lights that could not be turned off. So even the placement of lighting and bollards, something that simple, can have a dramatic effect on people's enjoyment in the community, and we want to look at making sure that we're talking about even the small stuff. So I'm going to go on to some of the quick wins so far. We're not very far down the process, as I said. The RFP hasn't even been issued. We're still in early stages. But we do have 2 key victories that I want to talk about today. The first is the Hamilton LRT Corridor Community Art Pilot Project. So as I identified, we had a problem along the line with all these boarded up buildings. They looked bad in the community, the residents it reflected poorly on the project, and it just was bringing the residents down. So we brought this on early on to Metrolinx, and Metrolinx agreed to give us $20,000 as a pilot to see what we could do with those buildings in terms of animating them, in terms of engaging the public. And what we did is we partnered with the Hamilton Wentworth District School Board, a couple of local artist collectives, a couple of artist not-for-profits, and the art gallery, and we are now rolling out, we're going to reanimate 4 buildings along the line with full public art that will be engaged with youth students as well as high school students, so a range of students on 4 different projects that will liven these things up with community projects that they can all point to and say, look at how I contributed, look at what happened in the line. So it brings the community closer to the project, as well as brightening up these spaces that have caused a lot of upset in the neighborhood. Our other quick win was we got the GIC, so our city council, to pass a motion to create a community benefits advisory subcommittee that reports back to council to talk about what a community benefits framework would look like beyond LRT. So we're looking, actually, and that'll be my next slide, we're looking beyond public projects, but also private sector projects. Hamilton is booming right now, which comes to my next point. We have seen a massive increase in development in the city, and it's showing no sign of slowing down if LRT continues. Hamilton has no history of using Section 37, period, for any public works projects. At this point, we are actually still actively subsidizing developers to come into our community, like we're the poor industrial city we were 5 or 10 years ago. So we want to change that, and the way that we've been able to do that so far to get the council to pass the motion, unanimously I might add, is by pointing to our member coalitions and reminding them that an election was coming. As I said, we do represent about 100,000 people in the city of Hamilton. We've got the power of labor as well as some business groups, community groups, and we were able to use that to push the city of Hamilton to start talking about community benefits and looking at them. We were also able to leverage that power in changes to the secondary plan in the city of Hamilton. A lot of those small community groups that were up there, they banded together and worked on pressuring the city to change the secondary plan that was basically originally going to hand over the entire downtown downtown core to developers, to one that included Section 37 bonusing for social housing on anything over a certain height. It allowed them to talk about rental displacement policy built into the Hamilton master plan, so that if an apartment building was being taken down that you used to have rental units, that there were some provisos and some city power to do that. Now, this hasn't come into effect, but it's something that we were able to leverage on a small scale to get developers and the city and city staff specifically to stop looking at Hamilton as this provincial city where we need to do everything we can to developers, to talking about community benefits and talking about what we can get out of these dollars flowing in to grow our city. So that is the Section 37, but we're also looking beyond that. We're looking at maybe actually asking private sector employers to employ 1 to 5% of trades and marginalized people through the same pipeline that we're looking at doing with the LRT system. So that's in short, is basically the status that we're at. Now, unfortunately, LRT has become a little bit of a political football in Hamilton, as it does every time there's a municipal election. So everything, as I said, is on hold, pending hopefully a council that is more progressive and more supporting of both community benefits and the project itself before I can give you any more of an update. Thank you very much. I look forward to answering your questions later.
Thank you very much, Carl. As you can see, some powerful stuff happening in Hamilton and directly community driven. It's really about inclusive development, ensuring that community has a voice at the table whenever development is being done in their communities. Before I bring on what I consider as my bright spot for the day, I want to play a video from the community in Windsor, Essex, and hopefully I can do it.
What would you like from community benefits?
Sandwich Town Revitalize, happening.
I'd like to see the money go towards a museum complex.
Good parks that are kept up and clean and safe for our children.
I would like to see transparency.
I'd like to see them come and help the older people here.
Well, I'd like to see some improvements to the transit, maybe some links to the county, and expansion of the transit hub to LaSalle and also to Tecumseh.
I would like definitely neighborhood renewal.
Green infrastructure, open public art competitions.
Cycling infrastructure would be pretty good for Windsor. It'll attract attention. A legacy fund to support the community.
I'd like to see Ojibwe shores protected.
I'd love to see sandwich rejuvenation, art projects.
Well, I'd like to see the streets improved.
More funding to promote community events.
I'd really like to see more bike lanes in the city.
More green spaces throughout the city.
I'd like to see more events that bring us together, like open streets.
Neighborhood revitalization.
Gateway arches.
Separated bike lanes.
Education and jobs, for sure.
Equity and sustainability.
Windsor, Essex, as you might know, just recently got their community benefits agreement on the Gordie Howe Bridge. I mean, it's fresh, and I really want to thank and congratulate Brian Gray and his team, his amazing team, from the Windsor Essex Community Benefits Coalition for negotiating and standing firm. And I think some of those community residents' vision will actually come through. So Brian Gray, who is he? Among his impressive list of accomplishments, which I just couldn't list them all. Brian is married, father of 4. He's been a resident of Windsor, Essex County since 1966. Notably, he was the executive director for 10 years at the Harrow Health Centre, Inc., a family health team. He is a founding director and then secretary of the Association of Family Health Teams of Ontario in 2006 to 2011. He sat on numerous committees there, including finance and political action. He was a representative of Essex, Kent, and in 1998 to 2002, where he supported the many social services and organizations that serve these communities through awarding of various grants to sustain their programs and services, and the many volunteers who make these programs successful while he was on the Ontario Trillium Foundation board. So please, we welcome Brian to share his journey.
Well, thank you, Rosemary, and thanks for making it a point of having us here today. A great opportunity, and certainly interesting to hear these other people's journeys and what's gone on. A little bit of background on what project we're involved with, and it's the Gordie Howe International Bridge between Detroit and Windsor, the most important cross-border for all of the things that go on between the United States and Canada. More than 25% of the trade between the two countries crosses this bridge, in excess of 7,000 commercial vehicles a day. And the existing bridge has been around since, about 1930. So it's getting up to about 90 years old, and it's in very, very poor shape, and it's owned by a private investor. If anybody can imagine a cross-border crossing having that effect, it's really been very, very hard on the community. How that part of it has gone. So about 18 years ago, the federal government determined, hey, this isn't the way it should be. If we're going to have something that important, it should be owned by Canada and the United States, and we're going to start on this project. So 18 years later, we finally get to the point where the Prime Minister comes down and makes the announcement 2 weeks ago. The project's going ahead. It's $5.7 billion. And out of it, there was a requirement on by the federal government that there would be community benefits that would be a part of this project. It's pretty unique because Canada is funding the total cost of this bridge project. The state of Michigan was in dire financial straits back in 2010, didn't have any money. If the project was going to move ahead, we had to find a way to do it, and the federal government committed all the funds that are going to be on this project. So that's pretty unique. So we really were kind of not aware very well in the community of this whole concept of community benefits. You know, community benefits before were usually one of these things that municipalities would give developers some kind of permission to violate codes or whatever it was if they build a park or if they contribute to something like that. They weren't a really mandated positive type of what was going to happen. So last summer, we were exceptionally thankful, and I can't say enough good words, to the Atkinson Foundation, to Colette Murphy and Jen Miller, and certainly to Alexander Bravo from the Broadbent Institute, for coming down and activating, motivating, and inspiring our community to get involved and get on this bandwagon in a very, very short period of time. So we had about 3 months in order to put our whole board together, and we have 25 people on the board, and it's made up of community organizations such as the United Way, the Labour Council, Workforce, Windsor Essex, institutions such as St. Clair College, Hotel Dieu Hospital, the Port of Windsor, and residents on an equal basis, because it was really important that residents have a say in how this is going to affect them and their lives and the things that they wanted to see that would be positive coming out of it. So this was a little bit of it. Part of the education concerns that we've had is people aren't really aware of the potential of community benefits and how great they can possibly be. So we were very, very fortunate to have Lorraine Goddard, who's the CEO of the United Way in Windsor, has really, really enthusiastic about making this part of it happen. And the United Way provided us with so much support. It's been absolutely tremendous. So we started in the summer of 2017. We had a very, very intense 8-week period where we really went out and tried to get the feel from the community about the effects that were going to happen by having this massive project. It's going to be 6 years in total. There's going to be construction. There's going to be disruptions to businesses and all of these types of things, such as happened in the Crosslinks project and is happening right now. So in that time period, we hosted 32 different events. We did 158 door-to-door surveys. We had 900 plus ideas that came from these community events. And out of that whole group that we had attracted and worked with, there were 52 self-identified as representing 52 groups, organizations, or governing bodies from our community. So we did a very, very intense and very critical survey of the community that we thought was most important in what was going to happen. So in total, we had 643 different inputs, whether they happened to be through these meetings, online surveys, and whatever else. Out of that, we had a total of 900 ideas that people brought forward as things they would like to see happening. So you got to kind of get this effect of what we were trying to do in such an intense part of short period of time. It was absolutely incredible. And we were so lucky to have such a great committee that was able to work together so well and attend so many of these sessions. It was absolutely incredible. So as November 1st approached, all of a sudden the Bridge Authority said, oh, we're going to extend the period for another month. So, wow, it was just like going on vacation. It was incredible. And, but we put our 17-page report together, and we identified five pillars that we could take these, all of these ideas and fold them into at some point. So the very first one was a revitalization of Sandwich Town, which is the community where the bridge is going to land on the Canadian side. The second thing was environmental concerns, whether it was during construction, after construction, during the life. They're claiming the bridge is going to be there for 125 years. I don't know who's got that crystal ball, but that's pretty incredible. One of the other major points was educational and job opportunities during construction and after construction. So working in conjunction with the university, with the community college, and actually the high school level, how can we get kids out there? How can we get apprentices out there? How can we get these people involved in any way, manner, shape, or form that's going to be better for the community? The fourth item that we put on as one of our pillars was gateways. We wanted the gateways to be very representative of the community and of the region, because this whole thing that we're talking about is Windsor, Essex. So we're just not talking about the city of Windsor and the site where the bridge is going to land. These are effects that we want to see happening all through the community. We want to see welcoming signs in multiple languages, because we're dealing with a lot of Spanish-speaking people in Detroit, and certainly with French, we want to have that here and for our side too. And the last title that we put on it was mobility and safety. So because of this, what's going to be happening with this bridge, there's all kinds of issues with how people are going to move around, how it's going to affect them during construction, and what the final thing is going to look like as far as being able to access the bridge and access the community. We don't want the bridge to be a dividing line like, like the Gardner Expressway, where it separates community and that type of stuff. We want the bridge to be an integral part of what's going to happen. What we felt was really a strong part of our proposal. And so we didn't prioritize any of these. We just gave this report to the Bridge Authority. They passed it on to 3 different proponents, and they asked them to come back with their report. So that was in the very first part of December. And they basically said to us, well, go sit at home. Thanks for the work you've done, and we'll talk to you at the end of September. Well, we weren't prepared to do that, so we advocated frequently during the course of the winter with the group, and we said, we want to be there. We want to be a part of the solution. We want to be a part of the ongoing, not necessarily the management, but certainly have some kind of oversight to make sure that whatever community developments come out of this thing, we want to make sure that they're followed through on and that the developer does it. So we were very lucky when they chose the final proponent back in May that it was a group called Bridging North America, and there's 2 of the major firms involved in it have been involved in the Crosslinks project here in Toronto. So they're quite familiar, and anybody that's gone and seen what the community benefits are there, we know that these groups have an understanding of the types of things that they can deliver and how they should deliver them. So as we got to that point in time, we're going, you know, there's some other major infrastructure projects coming in Windsor. There's going to be a new hospital. And now in the middle of all this, the federal government has given the private owner the capacity to build new links and new crossings at his site. So how that's going to reflect back on this whole thing is nobody's really certain what's going to happen. So in the start of the year, we said probably one of the strongest things we can do with regards to this is form some kind of binational committee with Southwest Detroit Community Benefits Group. Now, they've been at this for 10 years, and we have a tremendous amount to learn from them. One of the really unique things that happened with them, the site where it lands in Detroit is a massive site, 160 acres, and they've cleared it. It looks like a war zone over there. At one point, there were 30,000 residents there in its heyday. Now it's down to about 2,000 people live in the neighborhood. So the city of Detroit sold land to the Bridge Authority for $55 million, and the city of Detroit turned it over to their community benefits organization. What a tremendous, tremendous thing that was to start this whole thing off. So they used $32 million of that to relocate people. People's homes were being destroyed in that, and they moved them out to other areas in the city of Detroit, provided them with funds to move and things like that. It was tremendous. They provided $10 million for training and education, for job apprenticeships, for jobs during construction, for jobs during the operation and that type of thing. And several $million were devoted to some healthcare initiatives that are unique to that neighborhood. So what we promoted back to the Atkinson Foundation was this unique opportunity to have a binational coalition working together. And Atkinson found and was able to support the Windsor operation to enable us to hire a full-time employee to really help us as we go through these next 18 months, well beyond the bridge one and into the other community benefit types of opportunities that are going to exist here. So once again, tremendous thanks to them and what they've seen and what their vision has been to help us move forward and to create a model for community benefits in these types of situations. So certainly one of the biggest things that we've tried to do is educate our community. You know, what are community benefits? It's a very, 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 very broad type of situation. And what the eventual model is going to look like, we're not really sure. So 2 weeks ago, the Bridge Authority came out with a 25-page report saying, hey, these are your community benefits. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to do things equally in both countries. We're going to give you $20 million for, yeah, that's pretty incredible. We were pretty excited. People in Detroit not quite as excited because it's in Canadian funds. So to them, it's only $7 million, unfortunately. But on top of that, they're going to do a bunch of different initiatives that involve the community. So one of the main streets in Old Sandwich Town that's going to be certainly adversely affected by the truck traffic and that type of stuff, that's going to be beyond this project. And that's an additional $12 million. They're going to be putting in a walkway and a bicycle access lane across the bridge. There's going to be 6 lanes of traffic, and there's going to be another 12-foot lane for bicycles and pedestrians. Remarkable opportunity. And they're going to tie into existing trails and walkways in the 2 communities. This is all above and beyond the $20 million that I just spoke of. So they've taken the environmental concerns and they've created buffer zones. They're creating unique plantings of local trees and grasses and that type of thing. So they've addressed a lot of the environmental concerns that we had and how they're going to mitigate the effects that major project like this, either during its construction or during its operation. They've created a special $5 million fund for anything that they didn't see happening and that will be affecting down the road. So we're hoping that we're going to try and leverage that into being the legacy fund that we talked about, because we think that's a very important part of this thing moving ahead. I guess that's pretty close to where we are right now. The other thing that we did manage to get out of them is that they are going to have a community group that's going to be meeting on a quarterly basis, and that's going to have input and oversight to what the future and the final development of the community benefits are going to be. So we're at a very, very exciting time, and it's great to have the support of everybody around this. It's been so wonderful to us.
Oh, this is great.
Thank you.
So I have 1,000,001 questions, and I'm sure you do too. And I actually prepared 7. So here that goes. Well, the next 5 minutes that we have, does anyone have any pressing questions that they would like to ask to the panelists here? All right, Paul.
On our project alone, there's there's a $250 million allotment for procurement, and that within 100 kilometers of the site, on the Windsor side, on the Canadian side. So they've worked really progressively with local contractors and things like that, and they understand the concerns for marginal people to be involved as part of the solution here. Another part of it is there's Walpole Island lands are part of where this project is, and they're going to create a health center on Walpole Island for Indigenous people. So that's really a wonderful opportunity.
And I would just say from Halton, like, we're looking at rejuvenating the community benefits network that we have right now, because really we're going from more advocacy and awareness and education to now implementation. So we're looking at revitalizing our membership. And social enterprises is unfortunately not something that we've had much success with to date. Halton doesn't really have a vibrant social enterprise industry. But we are interested in including them in the conversation, because they are an important actor in this conversation. And I would also say social procurement is something that we're advocating for at the municipal and the regional level to include in their procurement policies. And we're starting small with them because we don't have a lot of political will or community will on this topic. So we're starting with things like social procurement, or we're working with the Halton Cooperative Purchasing Group, which is a cooperative purchasing group in Halton that does a lot of purchasing across the broader public sector, and they're looking at doing some social procurement activities as well. So that's part of our work. It's sort of split down the half, and right now we're focusing on community benefits just because we have the courthouse opportunity, but that is a part of our dialogue that we have in the community.
So to speak to the employment aspect first, then we'll talk about pure social procurement. Part of we have working groups that we've formed with stakeholders that we've put together, and one of those is a workforce development working group that involves a lot of the frontline employment services in Hamilton who deal with individuals. To basically what we're looking to do is to partner with those employment service providers, Mohawk College, and the trades to literally have a pipeline ready. As we noticed in the Toronto Benefits Network, that the problem was with supply. I had observed that they're not able to keep pace with the demands of Project Co. So if we're going to ask for 20% employment, we've got to make sure that we have the providers, the people, and everything stitched together through our coalition to make sure that we are ready to, if they give into our demand and give us 15 or 20%, that we can provide those people and have identified those people. So we're working on that aspect with the Hamilton Brantford Building Trades. They're a big part of our network. Mohawk College, who also we're looking at for professional, administrative, and technical services, and then a bunch of the employment providers in Hamilton, and there's about half a dozen of them that we're looking to involve for that aspect to help provide that pipeline. On the other side, on social procurement, that's part of any ask in a community benefits framework, right down to whether it's local catering that the YWCA does, which is one of our partners. They have a lovely catering division, so even the small ask. But yeah, that's definitely on our radar in terms of social procurement. It's just a question of what we discovered is there's two funding streams. There's what Metrolinx would be prepared for, and that's most of the dollars and cents, and then what we can get from Project Co, which is more of the stuff that's not going to cost them too much to do, but that they may be incentivized to do through participation in community benefits. So we've got those two lanes to work with, and they're very different pockets of both funding and of opportunity for social procurement.
I don't know if this is a quick question or not, but on a Likert scale, on a range, I'm interested in how you built your coalition, where the range would be start out organic or we started out strategic. And my special interest is in libraries as public libraries as community hubs. I know within Hamilton, I think that was one of your partners. Within Pickering and in Toronto, they're critical partners. So can you talk a little bit about how you built your coalitions? Since it seems like the critical success factor.
From Halton's perspective, is that it started out trying to be strategic, but then it turned organic because of the concept wasn't really well received. People didn't know about it. So everyone we did invite strategically didn't necessarily come to the table initially. And so it turned out into whoever wanted to come, welcome to the party, come join us during the advocacy and awareness and really punching for the ask. And then now we're looking at doing it more strategic. Now that we're going into implementation phase, who do we absolutely need to have at the table? What voices are we missing currently? And who wants to stay for the next version of this? So both.
Yeah, I'd say for Toronto, kind of the same. For the Woodbine Casino, it was more grassroots led, more residents sort of pushing organizations and community leaders to get on board to be able to say, we need to be able to get these jobs from this investment. For the Eglinton Crosstown Lrt, it was a bit of, one of the major things was the maintenance and storage facility and some concerns around residents around environmental concerns, because there was going to be diesel powered, a source of diesel power at the LRT maintenance storage facility for their trains, and a lot of people were saying that a lot of environmental concerns, and from that people started to get involved and say, like, what additional things can we advocate for our community, and they were able to get protections. There was also a community hub that was able to, that residents for the Finch West LRT were able to secure, and that's just through advocacy, right? Saying, like, we need community spaces here. Metrolinx has a large amount of land in that community, and is there a way where we can portion off a parcel of that land for the community to be able to, in the future, build a community hub or community spaces?
So we started off fairly organically, hosting a whole lot of meetings at the Central Library in Hamilton, actually, as well as the Hamilton District Labour Council offices, which are like opposite ends, kind of one's down in the East End, Barton and Ottawa, and the other one's centrally located in the middle of the city. And what we did is twofold. So we put a scattershot ask out, through social media, through our partner networks. We leveraged some of the money that Atkins gave us for startup to actually hire community organizers, people to just go banging on literal doors, attending community meetings after community. So they would go out to every hub meeting, every environmental meeting, and just sit there, present community benefits to them, and ask if there was interest in joining the network and coming out to further meetings. So that was our initial organization strategy, and it worked well. It got us a lot of, like I said, coalition partners. We switched now to the strategic because we've identified that we're missing people at the table, that although we did our best to knock on as many doors, we were handy, and Hamilton has something called the Red Book. It's paid for by a Trillium grant and the City of Hamilton, and it's literally a list of every not-for-profit community organization that's funded, and we went through that email, phone call, and we called everybody that was listed there, and so it was a great resource in terms of opening the door. The uptick rate wasn't as great as I would have hoped, but we did our best. But now we're noticing that we completely forgot about arts. So we sat down to form an arts committee, and it hadn't occurred to anybody in our outreach that we hadn't talked to a single artist. But we're going to be negotiating for community benefits and art projects along the line. So we had to quickly get together and start reaching out to the arts community, because it just organically it hadn't happened, and it hadn't occurred to anybody on our board of directors that maybe we want to talk to some artists because we're going to be doing community arts projects. So again, the same with the the BIAs. We missed talking to BIAs in the business sector when we first started because it was very community focused. But we're discovering that there was a lot of concerns for community benefits around business, so we had to start talking to the Chamber of Commerce, the BIAs. So we've moved to a more strategic approach now to bring in some of those other players that were missed. But for the most part, it was a very grassroots organization. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for your time and your attention and your interest in community benefits. And with your support, we're going to be able to build a stronger movement across Ontario, across Canada. And again, if you do have any questions, just write it down, and we're going to spend a few minutes extra here with the video and just get some responses to that, and we'll upload it to the ONN website and to the Toronto Community Benefits website and to all the community benefits coalitions here. And, you know, the one thing I would ask is let's not make this be the last time. I think this could be the start of something beautiful, us hanging out together and strategizing, you know, on the ground level. All right, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
So how did you engage your constituents and stakeholders in the negotiating process? How are they involved in the monitoring and evaluation of the CBA? How is labor involved, and how will they continue to be involved?
So one of the very first things that we did is we identified who should be the key stakeholders to be on our committee, and that was an important part of it. And out of that, 1/3 of them were community residents who were going to be the most affected by what was going on. By having other institutions and by having educational institutions, by having the labor groups involved as part of our committee, we've tried to make as broad of a base of community representation possible.
All right, so the Hamilton Community Benefits Network formed about 18 to 20 months ago in response to the provincial offer of $1.3 billion to build an LRT line across the busiest corridor in our city. It started out as a small group of volunteers who branched out across the city. The Hamilton District Labour Council and the Hamilton Brantford Building Trades formed the nucleus of the labour organizations pushing towards this. And from there they reached out to various community associations and organizations across the city to stitch together a broad coalition of almost 100,000 people represented in order to bring the largest number of voices to the project that we can in terms of extracting the best deal for community benefits, thinking that we needed not just the provincial authorization for community benefits, but a little bit of political muscle in a broad coalition to help us form that network and to get the best community benefits agreement we could.
I'm so excited about the recent successes of the community benefit movement here in Toronto, especially with the Woodbine Casino Rexdale Rising campaign, which we were able to leverage into some really awesome commitments by the developer for this project and for the local community. We're going to see local jobs, a 20% commitment for local jobs, in addition to 20% social hiring for all residents of Toronto, in addition to commitments for local businesses and social enterprises, as well as a lot of neighborhood improvements, right? So assessing some of the barriers that we were able to identify in creating our vision for this community benefits agreement, and understanding that one of the major barriers was that childcare for people to access employment, and to get a $5 million commitment from the developer for a childcare facility in the area is a real success.
So Halton Region has been given one of the 5 pilot projects from the province of Ontario. We're going to be getting the 21-room consolidated courthouse being built in Halton Region. It's going to be one of the 5 pilot projects for community benefits agreements, and we're gearing up and getting ready to go. We have recently moved our organization from an advocacy, awareness, and advocacy organization trying to get community benefits. So now that we do have a pilot in the pipeline, we're going to move towards more of an implementation model where we're looking to Toronto Community Benefits Network to actually help us leverage their relationships and their advice, their best practices, to rejuvenate our organization, to make sure that the voices at the table are the ones that we need, and to ensure that we have who we need to move this forward.
We're very fortunate 2 weeks ago when the Bridge Authority made the announcement with regards to what they've proposed. There will be a process in there for community representation on a committee that will meet on a quarterly basis, that will be an overseer of the community benefits that are a part of the project.
So the Hamilton Community Benefits Network represents approximately 100,000 people across the city of Hamilton between our various constituent members, between labor and our various community and neighborhood partners, as well as organizations. And what we're looking to accomplish in the next year is to build on the success of the Toronto Community Benefits Network in our conversations with Metrolinx, in terms of getting a CBA that is made in Hamilton, that represents the needs of Hamilton. We have a lot of challenges in our city, especially around displacement, social housing, and unemployment. The LRT line, as I mentioned in my presentation, goes through some of our poorest neighborhoods in the city, and we want to leverage as much from the Hamilton Lrt Project as we can to benefit those communities as well as the broader city. But also we would like to see more community benefits agreements in the private sector. We're looking at billions of dollars in development in the next few years, especially along the LRT corridor, and we want to see what benefits Greater Hamilton can get from those developments.
It was incredible and unprecedented to have these 4 community benefits coalition from Windsor, Essex, Hamilton, Halton, and Toronto community coming together and just speaking to their journey of community benefits to date and the successes that we've been able to achieve with this community benefits movement.